Howdy, everybody. Welcome to Track 33, The Script. And this is the Rook and the Kid podcast. And I'm your host, The Rook, and I'm joined by the analyst. And we are back. And we had a delayed start this week. We had a lot of people were working men this week, So we're recording on a Thursday evening, and we'll drop this on Friday. So if you're listening, happy Friday. And if you are a first-time listener, we'd invite you to subscribe to the podcast. If you're a first-time listener, if you've been here the whole time, we welcome you in. We always enjoy, the very few or many of y'all that decide to check in on what the script is and how we can shatter it. So also you can visit, TRAK.pod on Instagram to view our link tree or on the TRAK Pod on Twitter. And that'll give you access to all of our different avenues of podcasting, videos, content, etc. So appreciate you guys joining in. We got a lot to talk about this week. Of course, we've got the championship round just concluded this past weekend, and we're looking forward to the Pro Bowl, or we're not looking forward to, but we're entering into the Pro Bowl weekend this week with all the fun festivities of flag football and dodgeball. So very exciting stuff this weekend, I guess. But then the following weekend, we have the Super Bowl matchup, which we're going to get into. We're going to recap the championship round, give you all a little shatter the script on the Super Bowl as well. We're going to cover the Associated Press's nominees for the Players of the Year for 2023 season, and then a lot of the head coaching changes and offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator changes around the league, and of course our TRAK ranking of the week. Welcome in, and we're starting off hot with our championship round recap, and that consisted of the Chiefs and Ravens and the 49ers and the Lions in the NFC. Beginning with the AFC matchup, the Chiefs and the Ravens, somehow, some way, the Chiefs come away with a 17-10 ugly win versus the Ravens. And this was a scrappy one from start to finish. A lot of points were left on the board for the Baltimore Ravens. I don't know if I could say the same exactly for the Chiefs, but, the Ravens, I think, in this matchup got the short end of the stick. And credit to both ball clubs. We'll talk football first, and then we can maybe get into the script towards the end. But what do you think of this game? The analysts, I know there was a lot happening. There was some wild plays like that tip ball at the line of scrimmage that was caught by Lamar Jackson. I know there was the taunting from Zay Flowers and the fumble in the end zone by L'Jarius Sneed on Zay Flowers. There's just a lot of back and forth happening, and not even just that, but even before the game, the beef going around with Justin Tucker and Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, them playing a little adult banter before the game. But what were your thoughts on this matchup and the Chiefs advancing to another Super Bowl?
Oh man, the Ravens are down bad. I think if you really look at both of these games that were played this weekend, you would have to say the Ravens loss was definitely a little bit more demoralizing than the Lions loss. I will start with the Ravens. For me, the Ravens all year have been a really good running football team. They've always been really good at, switching out running backs, keeping Lamar in the running game. And, throughout the year, we've talked about how we wanted to see Lamar become a better passer. But Lamar's strengths, to me, are his ability to create plays in space. And it felt like he was trying to prove in that game that he could pass the ball and prove his critics wrong. But there's a lot of times where, you would see the middle open up and he wouldn't take off and he would get sacked, or, he had that strip sack earlier in the game. And then, just a lot of mishaps for the Ravens. One stat that stuck out to me when I'm talking about running the ball is they only ran the ball 8 times with running backs. And that's just crazy to think about, especially how good they are. Like I said earlier, they are at running the ball. They're really good at involving their tight ends in the running game and then kind of building their offense off of that. So that was really disappointing to see. And, flipping to the other side of the ball, the Ravens defense played extremely well. They only gave up 17 points to the Chiefs. At the beginning, it looked like they were going to get ran up and down the field on, but they kind of, buckled down, were able to make plays later in that game and hold the Chiefs scoreless in the second half of the game and basically give the Ravens offense multiple opportunities to score, and they didn't. So, I have some notes on here for Lamar, but I'll let you give your points first before I get into Lamar and something I would like to point out that I don't think a lot of people pay attention to.
Yeah, yeah, and I might have. Hopefully, I didn't. Hopefully, I don't steal that. But yeah, Mark Andrews came back for this game, so they got their number one target, essentially on offense. So we kind of figured there might be some explosiveness there, especially how Isaiah Likely kind of filled in that role in his absence in those 8-9 weeks that he was gone. And so that was a great addition and a very positive thing going into this game. But yeah, I mean, I was sitting there watching it with you and the kid and just kind of sitting there like, wow, it just seems like Lamar Jackson is not only just trying to do too much, it almost seemed like he was trying to do too little. Because he only had 8 carries on the day, and it looked like there was room for more. There was and they always talk about the way to beat Lamar Jackson is to make him throw. Well, the way Lamar Jackson beats himself is that he isolates his game into one phase. And the way that he wins ball games is he accepts that he's a master of all trades. He can run, he can be mobile, he can throw on the run, he can throw in the pocket whenever he sees the right to do so. So that's his strength. And it just seemed like it escaped him in this game, on Baltimore's side. And of course, you had their defense, starting off slow, like you said, and then towards the end, kicking it into gear and holding them scoreless in the second half. But I honestly, there needs to be a narrative, a standard basically held across the league, basically with every quarterback. And it started with Josh Allen versus his playoff wins were against subpar quarterbacks in his career, but the ones where he's lost have been against the greats. And I spoke about it last week about the AFC is just loaded with juggernaut quarterbacks once you get into the playoffs. And you were missing 1 or 2 this year with, Joe Burrow being injured. And, of course, Joe Flacco coming in, being their 3rd or 4th quarterback that season. So I don't want to discredit this, because if you took a lot of those AFC quarterbacks and threw them in the NFC, you'd probably see twice as much success in terms of playoff. So, being in a division with Mahomes, Burrow, Allen, Tua, Lamar,
now
CJ Stroud, yeah, the newcomer, Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence, that's not easy at all. And so, but yeah, the narrative here on Lamar Jackson that you want to keep the same energy on when they bash other quarterbacks is that his only 2 playoff wins, have come against what was his name? CJ Stroud and Ryan Tannehill. And that's CJ Stroud in his rookie year, which they were clearly just weren't ready. So they're just, I don't know, there needs to be kind of a standard held, and it's not just about a win on the stat sheet for playoffs that defines a football player. There's a whole lot more context to the game. And I'm kind of giving that argument, whatever side you want to be with these quarterbacks. So I thought Lamar fought his ass off, but yeah, I just think he kind of hurt himself, kind of isolating himself to one part of the game. And, no running game did not help Baltimore in this.
Yeah. I have 2 major points to make here. One is like, what excuses, kind of what you're talking about is what excuses left for Lamar Jackson. Not a great playoff record. He's 2-4, but like you said, he's got 2 wins against the quarterbacks you named. And then, like, just thinking about this year alone, they went through this entire season just raining through teams. I mean, they beat the crap out of the Lions. Any NFC team any NFC team they played, they destroyed.
Yeah.
49ers, they destroyed. They handled all business when it came to the Bengals and anybody else in their division. I mean, they made Miami look like a joke earlier this year. They were killing everybody. And so when you look at them going into the playoffs, they have the number 1 seed. They didn't have to play Burrow. They didn't have to play Allen. And they played the worst team that you're probably ever going to see Mahomes have for a long, long time. Like, this was the time to make that jump into the Super Bowl for Lamar Jackson. And that's why I was saying, this loss for the Ravens is just detrimental. I think more detrimental than it is for the Lions. And just on top of that, like Lamar Jackson got everything he wanted to this offseason. He got a super max contract. He got two. He asked for more receivers. They drafted one in the first round with Zay Flowers, and then they went out and got OBJ, who I don't think is who he was, but he's still a good receiver when it comes to down in the playoffs. I mean, he was a huge help to the Rams Super Bowl a couple years ago, and then his defense is the best in the league. I mean, they haven't given up points all year, and then they play Mahomes in an AFC Championship game and hold them scoreless in the second half. And then he's got two new coordinators. The coordinator for the defense, Mike McDonald, who's now a coach elsewhere. We'll get into that later. And then the Georgia offensive coordinator a couple of years ago that built this entire offense around him. And they get in the AFC Championship, and he doesn't play very well. So it's like that looks really bad for Lamar in the grand scheme of things. Yeah. And then the next page I want to talk about is Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers fumbled the ball at the 1 yard line, which, sometimes you can't control that. But right there, at the one, you got to know this is the most crucial time in the season. You're going into the end zone and you dive and put the ball out. And there's plenty of time on the clock. It wasn't like a 4th and goal. It wasn't like last play of the game. It was like, if we just get down to 1 here, we're going to punch this thing in. But he fumbled right there at the 1. And the other point I want to make is that stupid taunting call that he had. And I know that, I said it before, it's just, you're in the most crucial, part of the season. I know that Travis Kelce was doing stuff, throughout the game. But my whole point to that was like, he did it in the most crucial time of when the Ravens needed to make something happen. And I know they got, multiple opportunities, but you can't do it right when your team needs you the most in the most crucial game to get to the Super Bowl. I mean, when you're pushing a guy down and throwing the ball in his face and standing over him, that's a little bit different than getting a little chirp, getting a little chirp session after a play or getting in somebody's face mask. Like, put the ball down, maybe get up and just do a first down or something, but to get up, throw the ball in his face, push the guy down, and do all that, and then come off the field and blame the refs the next day. To me, that's just like all time. Like, dude, what the hell are you doing?
Right.
So anyway, that's it for what I have for the Ravens. For the Chiefs now, like everybody's been saying it for the last couple of days, but Mahomes is inevitable.
Mr. Inevitable.
He is. The note I have on here is he's clearly the best of all time. In my opinion, he's done so many different things. And like, if you go look at the stats that everybody keeps throwing out the last couple of weeks, like the identical run that he's having that Brady had, and he's about the same age as Brady at the time. I think he's just doing more with his team. I mean, you watched this game that we're talking about. The Chiefs early in the game got into multiple third downs early in the game where they were going to have to punt or whatever, and he just makes a freaking play. I mean, throwing off his back foot, the one hit where he's about to get sacked, and he does a whole flip around. He's still up and making plays. Like, that's something you would expect out of Lamar. But Mahomes is Mahomes. And he was highly efficient. He didn't throw for a lot of yards, but he was 30 of 39. I mean, that's against the Ravens defense, that's pretty phenomenal. So, I mean, all year we talked about how this team was completely deflated. They're not the same Chiefs. He needs help at receivers. And he just took this roster and was like, screw it. We're going the distance. So that's what he did. And, I mean, his defense is great. We've been saying all year that this is a defensive Chiefs team because their defense is pretty good. But Mahomes got it down multiple times during this game and was able to make huge plays on third down, money downs. Yeah, and that was the game changer. So that's it for me on the Chiefs.
Yeah, and that's what counts is those money downs, and all year we've been talking about how the defense has kind of been louder than the offense, but it doesn't take away from the fact that Mahomes is carrying this team. And I even went back to try and see if I could debunk certain things to different, not even Mahomes, just to different players that faced him. And as I was looking, I just became more and more educated that Mahomes is carrying such a load for his team. He's never really had a strong defense in his career, unlike Brady, who always had basically a top 5 defense entering the playoffs. And honestly, you look at Brady's playoff numbers, in the playoffs, they're not impressive, stat wise. I mean, yeah, I get it. He had those glorious moments, and he had a ring that was, handed to him by the Seahawks, and then another ring that was, miraculously won, in which credit to the Patriots in the Atlanta Falcons game down 28-3. But then you just look at Mahomes talent wise. I mean, there was always the arguments like, Aaron Rodgers is better than Brady. It's like, well, yeah, we get it. He's better talent wise, but then in terms of success, Brady is one of the best team players, and had the best organization of teams, whether that be because of him or his leadership or Bill Belichick, in the history of the NFL. And so what we're seeing right now is Mahomes is clearly the best on the planet, in terms of playing quarterback. And he had an outstanding run, like statistically wise, since he's entered the playoffs. I don't know if you saw those stats. I think it was like something 32 plus touchdowns and like less than 10 interceptions, because he had played a full 17 games in the playoffs. So they calculated a full season, and the numbers are insane. And you're like, oh my God. Like, I mean, this is probably, I get it. We're so tired of watching him in the playoffs. Of course we can get into the Taylor Swift stuff later, but we're so tired of, talking about, seeing Mahomes. Like, well, we just keep seeing the same matchup every year. It's always Mahomes. I mean, he's becoming the villain because there's a great quote from a Christopher Nolan movie. He said, you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. And that is exactly what is going on right now with Patrick Mahomes.
And to your point, the whole difference between like what you're saying about Brady in that time of play, it's like, yeah, the game was different. They like, you think of when we were growing up, who were the best quarterbacks? It's like, you had Brady, Peyton Manning, Drew Brees. If you want to throw Roethlisberger in there, sure. Phillip Rivers. Well, you look at those 5 guys I just named, they're all
Manning.
guys. Like, obviously the game has changed, and you're seeing more guys that are more mobile and gunslinger type guys like Lamar, Mahomes, Allen, those guys that are moving around in the pocket more. But that's kind of the point that I think Jared's trying to make here, is that Mahomes is the best quarterback and is winning as the best quarterback. Like, I think at the time you could have said like, well, I think Rodgers is the best quarterback. And that there was a formidable argument to make about how Rodgers was a better quarterback than Brady, but Rodgers just didn't have what Brady had. But you can't make, like, I don't think right now in the NFL, you can't make that argument against Mahomes, because Mahomes is playing as the best quarterback and doesn't have what, like, Josh Allen has or Joe Burrow has with 3 great receivers, or I said Josh Allen, Joe Burrow. What Burrow has, or like what Herbert has with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, even though they're never on the field. But like, he's doing this. This is the first time this year, and this is what I was referring to earlier about having the quote unquote worst team he's had.
Yeah.
This is the first time that Mahomes hasn't had like a great wideout option, and he had the season. He quietly had another 4,000-yard season, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
And is now in the Super Bowl. Like, it's crazy that that's going on yet again. I know nobody wants to see it because it's like, yeah, great, another quarterback that's going to be in the Super Bowl every year. But I mean, the argument to say that somebody else is better than Mahomes is just like outright stupid to have.
Yeah.
So like, you could tolerate that argument in 2010 when Brady was playing quarterback, but now that argument's just not even arguable. So
yeah. And I think the best way to put it is he's doing the most with less. The most with the least. And it's the last point I'll make about this game and Mahomes and all that kind of stuff is like the Buffalo Bills, right? They went into this game against the Chiefs 2 weeks ago, and everybody was heartbroken when they lost. It's like, this was Josh Allen's chance to beat Mahomes when he was at his weakest and play him at home in Buffalo. And they failed to do it, even though they definitely probably should have won that game. And then you flip to Lamar, and it's the same narrative. This is your one chance that you had the stronger team on paper. Historically, that year, you're the MVP, and you come in here at home and you lose to Patrick Mahomes, and you're just like, I mean, that's why we call him Mr. Inevitable. It's just, this was your year to beat him, because I'm telling you this right now, next year they're going to get stronger. They're going to go sign a number one. They're going to have a newborn number one already with Rashee Rice. They're not going to have to count on Travis Kelce as much. So they're going to get shit done like they do every year. And you better watch out, because if he can do this with this kind of roster and, with this less of an option offensively, then you better buckle up and get ready, because the one thing the NFL likes as well is the current relationship status of the Chiefs players that they got there with celebrities. So
yeah, but I mean, the other point of that too is, like, you saw that Kelce wasn't what he used to be. Like, he's getting older, and he's a tight end. So that the Chiefs are not going to sit there and be like, well, we're just going to throw Kelce and Mahomes out there again. Like, they're going to go get somebody.
Yeah.
Whether it be Higgins, Mike Evans, somebody, one of these guys that are going on the free agent market. There's
it's
a lot
good
of
receiver draft too.
Yeah. And they're going to go get somebody, and they're going to, I mean, they have Rashee Rice out there that's already kind of developing. They're going to go get somebody else to pair with that, and Mahomes is going to go out there and have another 4,500-yard season next year.
Yeah. So, he's gonna ball. But yeah, so the Chiefs advanced to the Super Bowl. And so now we'll flip over to the NFC side. The 49ers defeated the Lions 34-31. And boy, like, when we were watching this game, we really thought that the Detroit Lions were going to come out and just smoke the crap out of them the way that this game started off. I mean, the scheme that Ben Johnson wrote up was an elemental scheme to get him ahead. They were up 24-7 or 10 at halftime.
I think it was 24-3 at half.
No, I think they had at least 7. But it was
right. Hold on, let me.
Yeah, I knew it was like a 3-score game.
24-7. You're right.
Yeah. And so they were in control, and we were sitting there discussing about, can Brock Purdy? We were always wondering, can Brock Purdy play from behind? Because in the past, when he's playing from behind, he kind of struggles. It's because he's not really used to it. It's not something that happens very often. And the narrative will tell you, or the mainstream will tell you, that Brock Purdy won that game for the 49ers. The truth of the matter is the 49ers defense and Dan Campbell's decisions won that game for the 49ers. Being inside the 30-yard line twice in the second half for the Lions offensively, and then opting to go for it on 2 4th and 3s and failing, which is a credit to the defense. And I get it. I said in the divisional round that Dan Campbell should not change his ways, and I like that he went for it on 4th down. But we talked about it early in the game when they kicked that first field goal in the first half, that you can't have any points left on the board. And Dan Campbell proceeds to do that stuff in the second half, like going for it twice, and then of course the fumble to open up the second half. It just gave 49ers, I mean, I think they tied it up before the fourth quarter even started, down 3 possessions. And you're just like, what in the world was that lead even for?
Yeah, it was 24-24 going into the fourth.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so that to me is on the I disagree with the call. I wouldn't say it's on the coaches, but you put your team in a bad predicament to where I get it, you want to be aggressive. Maybe the first time you want to go for that. The second time, though, I'm kicking a field goal. I'm putting some points on the board, and at least getting 3 instead of 0 on.
Well, here's the thing, though. The reason they did that, and that's the point I have on here, is like they had a kicker at the beginning of the year that sucked. They got this other kicker, and he was like 12 of 20 from 45 plus. And it was the guy that lost the job earlier in the year. So I saw a stat that the Lions 4th and 3 and under all year were like 85%. And that was what the first one was 4th and 3. Then you flip it around, and then they were on like the 40, so it would have been about a 50-yard field goal. That kicker was 12 of 20. So, like, I mean, there was a couple of questionable calls, but like when you're up 14, about to go into half, and you decide to go for it and lose, and they go down and score, it's like, oh shit. But at the same time, it's like we've been doing it all year.
Yes, yeah.
Like the way, like I think that's a good way to say it is like the blown lead really sucks. and there's a lot of questionable calls that you can go back and forward with. But that's why I was saying that the Ravens loss was worse than this Lions loss, because the Lions died on their sword.
Yeah,
they died. They went on a samurai way. They're like, hey, we've been doing this all year. If it fails us before we get into the Super Bowl, that is what it is. Like, we're going for it right here because this is how we built our team. And
yeah,
this
is our culture.
Yeah. So I like, at the same time, while I do think it's questionable, maybe the second time you kick the field goal to tie the game up, but at the same time, it's like, I'm Dan Campbell. We go for it on fourth down. I trusted my guys. We're going for it.
Yeah.
At the same time, it's like, you can get behind that. It's not like Brandon Staley on the Chargers, who started off doing that and then like would flip the switch and be like, oh my God, punt the ball. He stuck to his guns, and while they might have lost the duel, at least he's still holding the same revolver. So there's another metaphor to throw.
That's a good one. Yeah. Yeah. And Dan Campbell, he stuck to his guns. And I think the thing about Dan Campbell that I think if you're an NFL and football fan, more of a football fan, and you're you take an analytical approach to the game and you understand the context of football, you're looking at Dan Campbell and you should be appreciating that he didn't go into a shell when things got tough. He stuck to his guns. He's like, I've been doing it. Like you said, I've been doing it this way all year long, and I'm not going to change because I trust in my guys. And that's a culture that they're going to build in Detroit, which I think people can appreciate. But he made a very good point, unfortunately, after the game that said this was our chance this year to get things done because nobody thought we were going to be here and nobody knew what to make of us. Now they do going into 2024. So that was your chance to shock the world. Well, now you're going to have to go beat the world basically and overcome, a team that expects you to be good.
You were shooting at targets on everybody else's back, but now you're putting on the target body vest.
That's
right.
Is
the best way to put that.
Yeah, exactly. But
a lot of shooting going on here.
Yeah, a lot of Western analogies and combat analogies. But, on the 49ers side of things, props to their defense and Shanahan. Like, I really do think that Dan Campbell's ability to stick to his guns is what helped Shanahan win this game. And it had nothing to do with the fact that Shanahan outcoached Dan Campbell, because he definitely did not. And it was more the fact that they died on their sword. The Detroit Lions, they fell on the sword. And they didn't really impress me. And I do think, we'll talk about going into the Super Bowl, who I think is like just kind of the headline, because we're going to do predictions next week, but just kind of the headlines of the Super Bowl. We'll get into that. But, I was more impressed with the Detroit Lions than I was the 49ers, is the general consensus of this game. Now, I did not want the Detroit Lions to win this game, because once again, I can't appreciate a good thing, because I've got fans in my ear who are also friends that are just yapping about, whatever you want to say. And it just drives me up a wall. Like, if you would meet these people and hear what they have to say, you're like, why can't you just let us enjoy this? You're the good guy, and I can't enjoy you. It's the same thing with the Texans. It's like, this is an outstanding quarterback and a young team and a great story. Fuck, I don't want them to win. It's like, it's the same thing. It was the same thing with the Lions. And I get it. Not everybody has the same experience with me. I
was about to say, I've got a good Lions friend that is actually
you have a good
legitimate
one.
Yeah, like he's like, I was wanting the Lions to win this game because like they just have a cool story. It's kind of like we were talking about with Dan Campbell, that like nobody expected him to be there.
Yeah.
And right now they're whipping the Niners' ass in the first half. And I mean, it was impressive.
Yeah.
But I totally get what you're saying. And I think every NFL fan can get behind that. Somebody feels that way, like whether you're Steelers, Packers, Bucks, Panthers, Bills, Bengals fan, you feel that way about some team because of some fan And, that's why a lot of people feel that way about the Cowboys, is because they feel that way. Like, you got some annoying Cowboys fan that's always talking about how they're going to win the Super Bowl every year. That's not us, but we, as Cowboys fans, can recognize that there are some idiotic fans out there that just do not have real expectations for Dallas.
Yeah.
But speaking on the Niners, like we're going back to the Niners, I totally agree. That's the one of the notes that I have is that's the first game that I've seen Kyle Shanahan create a great game plan that has that builds them back into the game. And I think that what you said is exactly correct. Is well, Shanahan's game plan at the beginning was getting their ass torn up by the Lions run game. I mean, you look at it, everything was working for the Lions in the first half. In routes, running game, getting the ball to Jahmyr Gibbs, finding Jameson Williams in space for a touchdown, getting the ball to Sam Laporta. Laporta was having an incredible game.
Dude is a monster.
He is so good. But the thing that changed this game was the fact that the Niners were at home. They don't get the fourth down the first time of 14. The Niners walk down and score, and they open the second half with a fumble. I mean, then all momentum just went straight to the Niners, and then it was like the Niners just came alive. So
yeah,
I totally agree. It wasn't like a Shanahan masterclass or a Brock Purdy masterclass comeback. I mean, props to him for coming back. But it was the mistakes of the Lions that kind of put the Niners back into like believe mode of like, oh shit, we're down 24-7. And then it was like, oh, fourth down? Okay, we scored. Oh, fumble? Yeah. Hey, we got a chance here. And then all of a sudden they're back in the game. So
yeah, exactly. And it also proved the last comment I'll make is it proved once again that the most valuable asset on that team is Christian McCaffrey, who they did not shy away from giving him the football. And also, I believe he got hurt. I believe he hurt his neck on that tackle late in the game, and because he didn't play. I get it was towards the end, but they didn't play him the rest of the game, even for the kneel outs, and they started massaging his neck. So thank goodness there's 2 weeks to heal. But the way that he crashed on the crown or top of his helmet, at full speed, I think he injured his neck. And so hopefully, I don't think it'll make headlines because there ain't no way that Christian McCaffrey is going to sit out this Super Bowl. But T's and P's, because that is a neck is like we saw with Vander Esch.
Yeah, I mean, it might have been just like a stinger Crick or something.
Yeah.
And those hurt. I've had a couple of those, but that didn't look like something that was just a stinger, just by the way he fell on the ground. That looks painful as hell.
Yeah, and it could have been like a pinched nerve or something like that.
Right.
But whatever it was, I think it bothered him. I think he'll be fine. He's going to play, but they won't go on the injury report.
I would love to see him have like a neck brace, like a
come out. Oh yeah, that's pure white boy running back right there.
Yeah, I want him to come out in Stone Cold Steve Austin pads from the longest yard, just the biggest pads.
That's how a white man runs a football. All right. Well, now let's get into our Shatter the Script segment. So we figured this one would go right along with the Super Bowl, and the Super Bowl all along is what I titled it. And so if you haven't been aware, there's social media, obviously you got Instagram and TikTok and Twitter, and it's kind of made its way around every single platform talking about the logo for the Super Bowl, and that the past 4 or 5 years that the logo of the Super Bowl has corresponded with the 2 Super Bowl teams that participated in the game. And this year it was it was purple and red, lined up to be what people believe was a Ravens and 49ers Super Bowl. And then once both those teams got the number 1 seed, it became getting increasingly more popular to say that this was the route and this was the script. However, I think people caught on, and a lot of people started to wake up to this script, and they had to make an audible because why? Who came into the league just a couple of weeks into it out of nowhere? Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift comes out of, I think it was like week 3, 4. It was very early in the season, but it wasn't before the season that Taylor Swift and Kelsey began to show on live television. People started complaining that they didn't want her at the games, but then she generated $331 million for the NFL, and she's making them bank and bringing a new audience in and just doing all these wonderful things to make money. And the one thing we always say in life, in terms of seeing how we see the world is follow the money. And so I think people awoke to the script, which was talked about before the leagues this season started, and then they implemented Taylor Swift into the NFL, which then brings us now to the new script, the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl versus the 49ers, the rematch with Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce making out in confetti after the game. Headlines, entertainment news, Time Magazine, ESPN, TikTok, Instagram, viral everywhere. Swifties go below. Travis Kelce gets down on one knee and proposes to Taylor Swift after the Super Bowl. I can see it all right now. This was the script from the beginning, folks. It's not like Alex Jones in this podcast right now, but all jokes aside, it could be real. I'm not saying I believe this is it, but this is our job, shattering the script. I think this is what happened. I really do. I think this is a high possibility. And you have probably a more realistic take on this. I don't know. But.
I just have that, you saw the number. They made like $350 extra million this year just by Taylor Swift being involved. But, I just have the headlines of the Super Bowl. Everybody's going to have all eyes on Taylor Swift. They're all talking about if she's actually going to make the Super Bowl because she has some, I guess, her tour or whatever in Japan like the night before. But I don't know. It's annoying. And I get why the NFL is wanting to do it, but it's just annoying because it just feels so fabricated almost. And I'm sick of seeing it just because it's like I don't really care who's dating who. I just want to see if Travis Kelce can catch the ball and if Mahomes can get him to the that's such an old head, and people are starting to say like, oh, you're overreacting to it. And it's like I don't really care how much she's on the screen. As long as she's not on the screen every time somebody catches the ball, that's fine. But what I'm getting really tired of is how the NFL account and stuff is, I guess, amplifying Taylor Swift being at the game. It's like, okay, great. Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, okay, cool, they're dating. I just want to know if Travis Kelce can run an out route still. And I'm caring about what he's doing on the field, not that Taylor Swift is in the box with his mom.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But, I think other things to pay attention to or other headlines that I think everybody's kind of worried about for the Super Bowl is how's the halftime performance going to be? I feel like that's something that everybody, you get about 6 beers. Yeah, you get about 6 beers deep. You have to sit through the halftime and maybe scrolling through some more bets or something. And you have to watch the Usher halftime or something that it's funny because I always feel like they pull people from 2004, 2003. And it's like, why, a couple years ago,
they don't even perform.
They did anymore. 50 Cent and
Madonna,
Snoop Dogg, stuff like that. I'm like, this music's from 2000, and I like 50 Cent, but he also looked like an offensive lineman when he got out there. He was looking pretty hefty. But the other one I think that a lot of people are going to be asked, we've already covered it, is is Mahomes the GOAT? And Jared might be right. They might give him another Super Bowl because he's been blessed with the Kelce Swift Infinity Stone.
Yeah,
but I don't know. We'll see. The other one I have is Brock Purdy not a game manager? If he goes into the Super Bowl and plays his ass off, you're like, oh, well, maybe. But so did Garoppolo, and Garoppolo left the Niners, and he's not even going to be the Raiders quarterback most likely. And then, what's next for the T Swift Kelce relationship? Jared already kind of alluded to that and saying maybe,
it makes
Kelce,
sense.
instead of saying I'm going to Disney World when he's hoisting up another trophy, he gets T Swift on the stage and proposes to her, and then it'll send the whole world into World War III. And then the next one is basically what is Andy Reid going to do next? A lot of people are talking about maybe he retires, maybe he sticks around. Who knows? He's kind of hinted at it once or twice. He's getting older. If you think about it, he's been in the league for a long time, and he's had a lot of success. Maybe another Super Bowl sends him along his way. Maybe he's still hungry to keep winning with Mahomes. Personally, if I'm Andy Reid, I'm like, hell, I've got the best quarterback in the NFL. We get
Yeah. I'm going to
pretty
stay to the
damn close
cheeseburgers.
everywhere.
Kill me.
Yeah. So those are kind of the headlines I have going into the Super Bowl. Another one you could add is the one Jared pointed out is McCaffrey okay? So
Yeah. Yeah, and those are all things to watch out for. Like to your point about the Purdy being a game manager or not, and that like if he balls out in the Super Bowl, but we know that the path and that the way that he's played and his validity compared to the rest of his teammates. We made a similar argument for Jalen Hurts when he went to the Super Bowl and said, "Well, hold on, look at the path. We actually think he's less than what he's showing right now." And then we got this year from Jalen Hurts. And so we could still be right about Brock Purdy. I mean, I don't want to take anything away from him, but there was reports they wanted Tom Brady instead of Brock Purdy that I brought up on the podcast, I think a week or two ago. I don't think they want to sign him to a deal, but props to Brock Purdy just going out there and doing his job. And I've always said I hate that this game manager narrative has come into play from a guy like Cam Newton, who's just kind of trying to get a click. But when you watch a game manager, that's the job of a quarterback. Everything outside of that or above it is just another feature to a product. And I think that if you are, obviously, what you're getting when you get a game manager. Like, did anybody think that Baker Mayfield's year this year was a failure? And is he a game manager? Yeah, he's a game manager. Was the season a failure? No, it was a demonstrative success because he was in a one-year prove-it deal. He had a great touchdown interception ratio, won his division, won a playoff game, and almost won a second. So I don't like to take away from the game manager. I just think it just tells you that you know exactly what you need for them to win ball games, and that there are just some things that they can't surpass, like a Mahomes or like Josh Allen in the regular season every once in a while. But yeah, I mean, just props to Brock Purdy. And the last thing I'll say on the Super Bowl is that I'm calling it right now. I think Travis Kelce is going to get on a knee and propose to Taylor Swift. Once they hold the Lombardi Trophy and they will walk into the sunset, Travis Kelce will retire and be gone, and he'll just continue with this podcast. And Jason Kelce will retire as well if he hasn't already.
I think another note that we kind of skipped over. I just thought about Travis Kelce and his podcast, the Justin Tucker pregame BS.
Yeah,
that was really stupid. Tucker's been doing it for 10 years. Warming up like that, and then Kelce and Mahomes start bullying a kicker, and it's like, dude, just tell him to move, or like you move over. There's 100 yards of field here, and then you go on your podcast and you start talking about how he's going to get up and you can take us up and go elsewhere and like throw his kicking team. It's like, okay,
yeah, you got him. You
got the kicker, man. Congrats.
Yeah. It looked like high school bullying.
Put the fear of God in the kicker.
Yeah, it was like you turn on a Disney movie and the kid's getting bullied in high school, and you're just like, hi, you're a loser, nerd, and then like throw his lunch money in like or his lunchbox and dump it over his head, and it's like bananas and apples, and you're just like, ha, you suck, you're such a nerd, and then they walk off. And it's like, God, I hate Derek. Like that's what it looked like. I was like, this is so childish. Y'all are 34-year-old adults.
Yeah.
And like, what are we doing here? Just kindly go up to the white gentleman and say, hey, I think I'll use my credit card and move your stuff over. So yeah, it was nonsense to me. Okay. That was our Shatter the Script segment brought to you by the Analyst and the Rook. And we're going to move into our TRAK Ranking, our Associated Press 2023 NFL Player Award nominees. These are your MVPs, your Offensive Player of the Year. It's like the full list that we're going to give. And I'm going to share my screen. That way everybody can see who the participants and nominees are. So I think, this is it. Here we go. All right. And if any comments on the side seem to be out of the ordinary, please don't blame me. We're good. But okay, let's start with the first page here. Actually, this is the second page. MVPs. The nominees for the 2023 MVPs are Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Christian McCaffrey, Dak Prescott, and Brock Purdy. Okay, out of those guys, who do you have? I mean, we kind of covered it before, but who do you have win? Who do you think is the most deserving of the MVP this year? If you had to choose one,
I mean, if this
including
award
playoffs,
is
I guess.
yeah, and if this award is so old that they just need to redo it. But I think the two most deserving guys, if we're not including playoffs, like because that's what I think of when we look at these awards, is like who do you not include when you get into the playoffs, like because that's what they base these finalists off of is like the season.
Yeah,
Now, if you're doing that, I think the two most deserving are Dak and Christian McCaffrey, just based off of their sheer numbers. But if you're including playoffs, I would have to say it's McCaffrey and Josh Allen. I think Josh Allen really turned it on late in the season. He wasn't the sole reason for their loss, and granted, he was playing Mahomes, and it sucks. But like, I think those two guys, to me, if you're including the playoffs, are the two guys that I would pick. But if you're not including playoffs, it's Prescott and McCaffrey. Just go like we talked about it before. Go look at the numbers. Prescott was the best quarterback all year, and McCaffrey was an absolute juggernaut all year running the football.
yeah, I agree with a lot of those. And I said earlier that the MVP was going to be Lamar Jackson. But I think his name on this list or on this as a nominee here represents his team, not himself.
Yeah.
I really do think it speaks more to the team that he had. And I know that he bounced a lot of NFC teams that were, playoff teams or above 500 winning teams during the regular season. And that speaks a lot, but that also has to do with the number one defense. And you kind of have to add performance as well. When you're grading an MVP, it's like basically saying best stats, most wins, most flashy, everything that you want an MVP. And I think if you look at it, who had the most explosive games, the games in the regular season, the highest point differentials, and there's two guys on this list in the quarterback position, and that's Josh Allen and Dak Prescott.
Yeah, and to go to your point for like the team award, I think Brock Purdy is on that list for that reason too. I think Brock Purdy had a better season than Lamar.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you go look at that's why Christian McCaffrey's up here too, because that team was dominant all year, and it wasn't just Brock Purdy. So
yeah, and another name that probably should have been on here, which I'm surprised it's not, but I get you can't fit them all, is like Tyreek Hill. Like Tyreek Hill belongs in there.
Yeah,
with
look at
Christian
the next.
McCaffrey.
Look at the next one we're going to go through right here.
Yeah, and like offensive player of the year, Tyreek Hill, Lamar Jackson, CeeDee Lamb, Christian McCaffrey, Dak Prescott. Now, this is the fun one where like the NFL will probably get the MVP, give the MVP to Lamar, like we said, and then like probably do something stupid and give the offensive player of the year to Dak Prescott, and then just be like, wait, what? Both of those are wrong because Tyreek Hill and CeeDee Lamb and Christian McCaffrey were the three best offensive players this year.
And I think it's almost in that order. Like if you're looking at like 1, 2, 3 here, like gold, silver, bronze, I think Tyreek Hill should win this award. McCaffrey should come in at 2, and then CeeDee Lamb at 3.
Yeah,
I think if you're giving this award to the best offensive player, it's clearly Tyreek Hill. I mean, that guy almost broke the receiving record this year.
Yeah,
he was crazy good.
It makes no sense because the MVP award is a quarterback award. So I don't believe that a quarterback should be in the category of an offensive player of the year. It just doesn't make any sense. And I get we have all pro for stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, on the offensive player of the year, I totally agree with your list there. With the if you're going to rank them, you got Tyreek Hill, Christian McCaffrey, and CeeDee Lamb, and you can argue between whether McCaffrey should be in front of Tyreek or not. But yeah, I don't feel like quarterback should belong on that list. And then defensive player of the year. We got our boy DaRon Bland in there with Max Crosby, Myles Garrett, Micah Parsons, our boy, and TJ Watt. They're definitely not going to give it to the Cowboys. So you need to we can go ahead and remove Darren Bland, who had 9 interceptions this year, almost as much as Trayvon Diggs 2 years ago. And then Michael Parsons, who had an outstanding year in terms of like advanced statistics. He was one of the most efficient pass rushers in the league. You're right there, if not in front, right next to Myles Garrett and Max Crosby. So I think Myles Garrett will win the Defensive Player of the Year if I'm a betting
Yep,
man.
I agree. I think
Yeah.
it's Myles Garrett 1. I think they'll probably put TJ Watt at 2 just because he has all the pretty boy stats like sacks.
Yeah, the
And then I
flashiest.
would say number 3 is probably going to be Micah.
I would say number 3 will be Max Crosby. I really do believe that Deron Bland and Michael Parsons probably won't even get a vote.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Bland will because later in the season, after his immaculate or his streak of interceptions, he kind of got torched later on the year. But I think
Yeah.
Michael Parsons like rush stats and stuff like that. I don't think this group's going to look at it, but he was one of the most proficient pass rushers this year. That's the only why I say 3, but I would say Crosby comes in a close 4th.
See, yeah, I would be curious to know like what the committee or the voters, what they look at when they vote. I'm hoping they have access to like those advanced statistics and make a decision, based on something like that. Like this dude was the most efficient at his position, or this dude was the flashiest. Like, and they have the freedom and liberty to grade based on their own tendencies that they think should make a player like these deserving.
Or this player was commanding 2 people to block him all year type stats, where it's like he needed 2
or
guys.
3.
Yeah,
or 3. And it's okay. Coach of the Year, Dan Campbell in there for the Detroit Lions, John Harbaugh for the Baltimore Ravens, D'Amico Ryans for the Houston Texans, Kyle Shanahan for the 49ers, and Kevin Stefanski for the Browns. It's got to be D'Amico Ryans out of this list. If you're going to give him the most, yeah, I mean, I would say it would be D'Amico Ryans here because he got a team that was it was the lowest expectancy out of the rest of the coaches in that list, and he ends up winning the division, winning a playoff game, 10 wins, and is going to have the Rookie of the Year quarterback in C.J. Stroud. Like I think on paper, if you look at the definition of the Coach of the Year, who did the most coaching for success, I think D'Amico Ryans fits that narrative.
Yeah, I think it's a close call between D'Amico and Dan Campbell.
Yeah,
because Dan Campbell just took a team that hasn't seen the light of the day in the playoffs in years to the NFC Championship. So I think it's definitely like all these other coaches are great, but like the Ravens were expected to be good. The 49ers have been good for 3 or 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Kevin Stefanski on the Browns, like the Browns were.
He's probably 3rd on that list. Just
Yeah.
because how impressive their defense was and the 4 quarterbacks that he had.
Yeah. But I think the 1-2 guys that you're going to be paying attention to the most is Dan Campbell and definitely D'Amico.
Yeah, I would agree, and I wouldn't care which one of those won. I just think my definition would be a guy like D'Amico. So, okay. All right. Next page, the Assistant Coach of the Year. We can kind of just jot through these because, Ben Johnson, Mike McDonald, who we talked about, moved to a new team. Todd Monken, Jim Schwartz, and Bobby Slowick, the offensive coordinator for the Texans. And this is one where I would give to Ben Johnson or Bobby
Johnson or Bobby Slowick. Again, Texan Lions. Yeah, I definitely agree.
Yeah, and I think Ben Johnson. What he did this year in the last 2 years, I would say, have been very impressive. And his scheme is it's pretty electric, and how it built over time throughout this year was fun to see. And he's a young, energetic coach, which is popular in the NFL these days. And the same thing with Bobby Slowick. He commanded an offense with C.J. Stroud where he had the fewest turnovers at quarterback this year, and broke Dak Prescott's rookie record for the most pass attempts without interception. He had some injuries at wide receiver throughout the year and continued to just put up numbers and compete.
Yeah, he's a huge game changer. And good note there is both of those OCs were high head coach candidates, and both of them are now staying with their teams. Ben Johnson is staying with the Lions, and Bobby Slowick is staying with the Texans. So that's great for both Jared Goff and for CJ Stroud.
If I'm Slowick, I want to stay another 2 years. I want to stay until it's contract time for CJ Stroud, because they got something special cooking over there, and it's what it looks like, unfortunately. Okay, Offensive Rookie of the Year. Jahmyr Gibbs, Sam Laporta, Puka Nacua, Bijan, and CJ Stroud. Now, I wish they had an offensive quarterback of the year because, and I get you can't really do that all the time, but CJ Stroud would 100% win that award. But Puka Nacua, dude. I mean,
that's what I was going to say. Puka Nacua had a hell of a year, too.
That dude can ball. And even when Cooper Kupp came back, he was still dominating in numbers.
This is a clear-cut, easy CJ Stroud.
Yeah, I think it's easily CJ Stroud. And then I don't want to knock on Sam Laporta either. I mean, that dude's
all 5 of those guys, except for Bijan because of reasons.
Arthur Smith is that reason.
Yeah, all 5 of those guys are gonna have bright futures in the NFL.
Yeah, and that's a fun rookie list.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun, honestly.
Yeah. Okay, defensive rookie of the year with Will Anderson, Jalen Carter, Joey Porter Jr., Kobe Turner, and Devon Witherspoon. Devon.
Hold on. On the offensive rookie of the year list, if you look at that, a lot of those guys were league winners for fantasy football too. Good compliments to your fantasy football team. So that's a cool thing.
Anyway. Yeah, Gibbs exploded. I think CJ Stroud was top 10. Bijan was top 15. Laporta was top 4. And Puka was top 5.
Yeah, you could even say like those out of those 5, those are guys like if you're in a keeper league that you're like, yeah, I'm definitely keeping this guy.
Yeah, or you sold the house for him somehow or some way in the offseason or yesterday. Okay. With the defensive rookie of the year, and I was going to speak on Devon Witherspoon because he had a very quiet, very good year, but it was quiet. It wasn't really talked about because he's playing for the Seattle Seahawks, who had a tough go at it with a tough schedule and a tough division. And then Joey Porter Jr., I think he's over there in Pittsburgh. Cornerbacks they're hard to talk about because there's so many. You got 3 or 4 on the field at all times, essentially. And, they get kind of hidden in a lot of ways in like a deck of cards. But props to those guys. But I think Will Anderson or Jalen Carter, I think, are the 2 guys that I think I would give this award to. But Will Anderson in advanced statistics, when he's talking about pressure percentage, double team rate, sacks, for a rookie, I think he's the definition of a rookie of the year on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I think the good point to make here is like if you go look at the defensive player of the year, how many of those guys are edge rushers? Well, there's 4 out of the 5 that are edge rushers: Crosby, Garrett, Parsons, and TJ Watt, and you have the wrong landed there. Like the Texans traded away some picks to go get their guy, Will Anderson. They needed an edge rusher. And what do we say makes good defenses? Edge rushers. What's the most important position to have is a pressure on the quarterback that creates havoc in the backfield. And that's what the Texans did. And they've got a bright future in Will Anderson. So I agree. I think Will Anderson wins this award. I'm not really sure who comes out in second place, though, because that's another good list of defensive rookies that either, like Joey Porter was on the Steelers that just had a really year.
Yeah.
But, I think Will Anderson wins this award.
Yeah, I think it's the flashiest. And then comeback player of the year. Now, this one's intriguing because you got Stafford and Tua at the bottom there, but you got Joe Flacco, DeMar Hamlin, and Baker Mayfield, which all season long we were like, if DeMar Hamlin just plays one snap, he's going to get the comeback player of the year because he's Jesus Christ. And, and we're sitting here, and props to him. I'm glad he made it back on the field. But, in terms of, I don't know. I don't want to get too PC.
In terms of productivity, I mean, even before his injury, he wasn't like, he was just special teams guy. Like he wasn't doing much.
Yeah. Yeah. And props to whoever put up a highlight tape of him from his year this year on TikTok. It was like 3 plays and it was all special teams. And it was like, DeMar Hamlin's, highlights were friggin' nasty, and that shit makes me laugh. But at the same time, Joe Flacco comes out of retirement basically and just starts dicing up the league to get him, a seed in the playoffs. And I know they kind of blew it, but he came out of nowhere. But the one I want to give this award to out of anybody is Baker Mayfield. I don't know why. I
totally agree.
The dude has had a rough go at it ever since he missed ever since the Browns moved away from him to go sign, one of the worst humans on this planet outside of Saddam Hussein. And you got a dude he bounced to the Panthers and he bounced to the Rams, and then now all of a sudden he finds a home and everybody's making fun of him before the season starts that he can't hit a tight end and open stride in practice. And then he comes out throwing, 28 touchdowns and like 10 picks, winning the division, winning a playoff game, almost winning the divisional round versus the Lions. Played well in that game. And he's, sniffing the smelling salts before the game, slapping his helmet. It looked like Oklahoma Baker. He looked like he was home. I think comeback player of the year, the one I'm petitioning for is Baker.
Yeah, the NFL will give it to Tamar, but out of this list, I think you got to give it to Baker.
Yeah, I would agree. And then we got to do our TRAK ranking in accordance to this list. So our top 3 player nominees from this list in order of our TRAK ranking. So gold, platinum, and diamond. And so the analyst, I'll let you have the first go at it for your TRAK ranking, your gold top 3.
My gold is the guy we were just talking about, Baker Mayfield. Everything we just said, nobody kind of saw him coming, basically, and they kind of counted out the entire NFC South, and then the whole year we're talking about like, well, whoever gets in, are they even going to be worth anything? And Baker Mayfield made the Bucs worth something, and I think it kind of made everybody around him better. Obviously, the OC for the Bucs is now gone, but it gave Baker was in a prove-it deal, and he came out and he said, "You know what? I'm going to show these people what I'm made of," and basically bet on himself. And he was pretty dang close to beating the Lions, and he beat the brakes off the Eagles. So he was playing very high caliber football late in the season, and that's all you can ask for. And it goes back to the question I asked when we were covering the wild card weekend. Is like, can you imagine how the Browns feel right now? If they had they're watching Baker Mayfield, and they're like, damn, we just paid a sexual predator. Yeah, that's my gold ranking is Baker Mayfield for sure for a comeback player of the year.
Yeah, that's a good one. And I went kind of a different route with this list. I kind of went with the people that I thought they're going to go unnoticed kind of on this list, but I think they had just an extravagant year in terms of expectations. First, my gold ranking was DaRon Bland. This guy was not supposed to be an outside number 1 corner going into this year, with Stephon Gilmore and Trayvon Diggs. He was supposed to be that number 3 nickelback corner. And obviously Trayvon Diggs, unfortunately, goes down with the ACL tear in practice, moving DaRon Bland to the outside, where DaRon Bland will break the pick 6 touchdown record this year. 8 or 9 interceptions, which is almost as much as Trayvon had a couple years back, which is extremely difficult to do in the NFL, and was a very quiet guy. I think the one thing that hurt DaRon Bland was the spotlight, because there was 2 or 3 weeks that he was in post-game interviews and they were giving him all this attention. I think he's a very conserved player. He goes about and does his business. And I think I don't think he liked it. So I think his season was very underappreciated, and he just blew away expectations in terms of just being that number 3 nickelback cornerback, kind of finding his spot in the pros. And he exceeded.
I think that's a good one. I like that you're doing that with your list, though. Mine's kind of the same. I thought maybe Baker Mayfield would be kind of like an unhighlighted guy on this list.
Yeah, I agree.
My, what do you call this? Platinum?
Gold, platinum.
Diamond. My platinum is kind of in the same boat. I picked Max Crosby for Defensive Player of the Year because, paint the picture here. Great season on his end. He's been very vocal about how, them losing McDaniels and how they've had to play down the entire year. There's been a lot of questions around Las Vegas, but he really backed the play of them keeping Antonio Pierce as their guy. And I think that's like very credible to him because he had such a crazy good year. And, him being up for Defensive Player of the Year and basically going out and vocalizing as with the leader of the Raiders being like, hey, we really liked what we had out of Antonio Pierce. We want to build on this. And that's what got Antonio Pierce's job. So I just thought that was kind of credible. And, you don't see another Raider on this list, but there's not a Raider out there that's really sparking anything like that. So shout out to Max Crosby. He might be
Yeah.
a little bit of an interesting character, which I think he is. But, I think him being on this list kind of shows a lot of what he did for the Raiders organization. So
Yeah.
that's my platinum.
He kind of reminds me of a young DeMarcus Lawrence, except probably better. He's very,
Yeah,
very
he is
efficient in the
better.
run game. But yeah, my platinum was Puka Nacua. Having him in there as a number 4 fantasy wide receiver, 18 PPR points a game. He was surpassed 100 receptions this year. Just all these things have just a random. I don't know. The video came out when they were trying to draft this kid, and they were just like, yeah, I think we're gonna steal him in the late round, 5th or 6th round or whatever. He's gonna steal the show, and he did exactly that. And Cooper Kupp coming off that hamstring injury, then battling through it all year, kind of wasn't himself. And Puka really carried the boats for this Los Angeles team with a gunslinger like Stafford, and I think it was a great fit. They'll probably be together for another 2 years before Stafford's probably done. But yeah, I mean, this dude, I think he just came out of nowhere. No one would have expected. No one knew his name. No one knew where he came from. And then all of a sudden, you have him top 5, fantasy wide receiver and the best rookie at wide receiver this year on paper.
Yeah, I totally agree. I almost put him in here as my gold ranking. My diamond ranking is kind of interesting because I've hated on this team a lot on this podcast, but mine's D'Amico Ryans as a head coach of the year candidate. And the reason I say that is because you think about where the Texans were last year, and I'm not even sure he wins this award. Kind of what I said earlier on this pod is like, I don't know if you can give it to D'Amico Ryans just because of what Dan Campbell did and the strengthening of the Lions organization that he did. But you can at least give flowers to D'Amico Ryans, basically saying, hey, when's the last time the Texans were even remotely relevant or in any way, shape, or form a season like that before Deshaun Watson? It's been a while. They looked like a team that was going to go into the depths of hell for a good 5-10 years after the nuclear missile they received of losing Deshaun Watson, Bill O'Brien's era, trading away DeAndre Hopkins for a bag of chips. I mean, it just looked like they were a laughing stock, but they got D'Amico Ryans leading the charge, and then they went out and got, they trusted him to go get his guys. They drafted Stroud. Like I said earlier, they went out and got Will Anderson. And those guys were the guys that, helped them get where they are now. Yeah. So I think that to me is one thing that you if you're a team that's broken, that's one thing that you want to see is the flip of the switch with like, oh, we finally have a good coach. We've got good coordinators. We've got good young players. We're headed in the right direction. So, like, even though they lost in the divisional, you can kind of say the same thing for the Lions with Dan Campbell. It's like you like the direction your team is heading in. And I wish we could say the same for our teams. But, my diamond is definitely D'Amico Ryans.
Yeah, that's a good one. And then my diamond is Josh Allen, Buffalo quarterback.
That's another good one.
I just think his season's going to go completely just swept under the rug. I mean, this dude, Stephon Diggs did not play like a number 1 wide receiver for the second half of the season. And, the compliments outside of Stephon Diggs, or the accessories, I should say, outside of Stephon Diggs they're not up to par for a quarterback like Josh Allen. Gabriel Davis had games where he didn't even catch a football. But Dalton Kincaid was a great addition to Josh Allen. But just for him to go through this league and, be 6-6 and then finish 11-6, winning the 5 most important games in November, December, and January, and then, winning a playoff game with this team, and then should have beat the Chiefs the way that Josh Allen played, I just think it's going to get swept under the rug. I mean, he had an outstanding year, and I get it. Josh Allen's going to come with a lot of fumbles and maybe some interceptions, but he's going to throw 1 billion and rush for 1 billion touchdowns every year. And it's good news that we're going to talk about it now. It's good news that, Joe Brady is being brought back as offensive coordinator. I think that really changed and flipped the script for the Bills, in the second half of the season. But yeah, those are our Gold, Platinum, and Diamond TRAK Ranking top 3 nominated players of the 2023 season. Okay, so we got a bunch of new head coach hires and offensive coordinators moving around left and right, and I'm calling it the new cast for the 2024 script. and I think it goes perfectly with this podcast. But yeah, we're gonna start. We're gonna go through it. Gonna give some brief comments on them because there was a lot of different moves. But the analyst, I think you wanted to start with head coaches, right?
Yeah, and I'll just quick fire through them.
Yeah,
and we can kind of give our quick comments, and then we'll move on to some coordinators. But I think it's good to start inside our division. With the head coaches. Obviously, news came out today that the Commanders, they fired Ron Rivera, and then they hired our defensive coordinator, Dan Quinn. Personally, as a Cowboys fan, I am glad to see Dan Quinn go for the comments I've made prior on this podcast about how our defense has been great in bad team scenarios. But, I mean, you saw what happened. If you're alive, you saw what happened in the Packers game. And it's happened multiple times before. So, you have any comments on that one?
Yeah, I mean, DQ, moving to Washington is hilarious to me because, one, we've said for a long time that he is so much better as a defensive coordinator than he is a head coach. And we did want him to kind of depart from Dallas because whatever his recipe was for us, I get it. It wasn't the worst, but it definitely wasn't the best. And he tried, that's 4 years 3 or 4 years under the same coordinator with kind of the same group. And you made some extra moves this year and still kind of couldn't get it done. I get you lost Trayvon Diggs and Leighton Vander Esch stuff, but I don't know. Perhaps he can. It's just weird to me also that the Commanders swapped a defensive coordinator for a defensive coordinator, essentially. Like they just kind of stuck with the same tier of head coach. I mean, I would say Dan Quinn's a better one, but
he's definitely better than Ron Rivera. But I mean, he's not.
I just don't think it's a big upgrade.
It's not, and it's like it doesn't scare me as like a Cowboys fan to see the Commanders go out and get him. Like if they went out and they got like Ben Johnson or somebody like that, I would have been like, ooh.
Right.
What are they cooking up in there in Washington?
I'm seriously afraid of the agenda right now. Yeah.
Yeah, but the fact that they went out and got Dan Quinn and like stole him from us, it's like, okay. One, I'm not really scared of Dan Quinn because I think our offense is good. So he doesn't have the weapons over there. Like we're gonna have to play him twice a year, and we, like Jared said, he's never really been that great of a head coach. He got the Falcons to the Super Bowl, but he was in charge of them when they basically blew it all to hell. And then the other thing about that to me that I find interesting about Dan Quinn is like for the last 3 years, he's been a head coaching candidate. And, he's for the last 3 or the 2 years prior, the first year he was with Dallas, he said, you know what, job's not finished here. I want to stay the DC. So he stayed. The second year, he did the exact same thing and was like, I really like being the defensive coordinator here. I've really enjoyed it. I want to stay. And then the third year, when you're looking and interviewing again, you decide to pick the Commanders to leave your DC role and be the head coach of the Commanders, who have no quarterback. They just traded away 2 of their best edge rushers. They really don't have anything going for them. Like, you're going to go risk your career and be a head coach again for the Commanders? Wow. So I found that interesting.
Yeah, and my last comment on Dan Quinn would be that the Commanders just flooded house or what's it called this. They removed the house. They cleaned house. Thank you. With all of their GMs, owners, management, and just brought in this new era of people just to go for a fossil in the NFL for a head coach. It made no sense. If you wanted to really freshen up your franchise, I would have gone and gotten somebody that that hadn't been a head coach yet, like all those young, bright, coordinators that got head coaching jobs that we're about to cover.
Or even their coordinator they have now, Eric Bieniemy.
Bieniemy, that's what you hired him for.
Yeah, I don't know. I found that very interesting. It's kind of like a question mark for the Commanders, but anyway, we'll move on. So the next one we have on here is the Seahawks. The Seahawks let go of Pete Carroll. That one was very interesting because they had, he's 72 years old. He wasn't. The reports are that he wasn't quite ready to give up coaching yet, and the Seahawks, felt like it was time to mutually part ways with him.
Yeah.
And they went out and hired the Ravens DC Mike McDonald, which I think is actually a good hire. I've always seen Seahawks. I don't know why. It's just because we grew up watching the Legion of Boom. But I always feel like the Seahawks are like a defensive team.
Yeah.
Like it makes sense to me that they went out and got a DC. I'm just like, it makes sense because I always feel like I think of Dan Quinn coaching the Seahawks. I think of some of the other DCs they've had. They've just always had like a formidable defense. Anyway, you have any comments on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great hire. I think it's interesting. I think that Pete Carroll was probably just going to depart once Russell Wilson was traded. His tenure there with Geno Smith was not going to be a long-term thing. So
no,
so I think it's a good move from Seattle. It's best to move off of that era. It's gone. So it's good to invite new change into the best defense that was this year in the Baltimore. So
I think that I think it's a good hire as long as they go get somebody to support the offensive side. And I think that's what I always think about with defensive coaches. And it's the flip side. Like, you can make this hire, but you better go find somebody that knows how to call offense too.
Yeah.
So next on the list, we have the Falcons. Obviously, they fired Arthur Smith after him not being able to figure out Drake London, Kyle Pitts, or Bijan Robinson. So they went out and they hired former Rams DC Raheem Morris, who a lot of people have come out, like Kyle Shanahan has come out and said, this guy's been a great coach. For me, I think this is actually a really good hire for the Falcons. One, because it comes from the Shanahan tree.
The Shanahan tree.
He coached with Kyle Shanahan. He was on Sean McVay's staff. There's another Shanahan guy. And I'm big on the Shanahans. And I think the league is recognizing that that's how this works. I mean, Bobby Slovic, the guy that we talked about earlier, he's a Shanahan guy, and he's making big moves. For the Texans, guess who else is a Shanahan guy? D'Amico Ryans. He played for the Texans, but he also coached with Shanahan on the 49ers. He was 49ers DC for years. So I think this is a great hire. We'll get into who they hired as the OC. I have that on here too.
Yeah, and
they hired who they hired for their OC? I can't remember.
Let me see. Let's see. Pulled up.
No,
Zach Robinson.
They hired Zach Robinson, and he was the
Rams offensive coordinator, I think.
Yeah, that's
the last
huge.
5 years.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, you get another Shanahan protege who has been under McVay, who is from the Shanahan tree, and he's been there for 5 years with one of the most explosive offenses. He's been to a Super Bowl. That's a great hire for an offense coordinator too, and that's something that I would be excited about if I was a Falcons fan. And then you get to place a quarterback. Basically, they're going to go after whoever the hell they want because they have no allegiance to any quarterback on their roster right now. And so they have the freedom to go after whoever. I'm excited to see who they get. We've always been wanting to see another, iconic figure like Mike Vick in a Falcons jersey. You just haven't seen it in a while. It's meant to be the uniform.
They go find a quarterback, they're going to be dangerous.
Yeah, that's the only missing piece.
Yep, and then the Panthers. I think this was kind of interesting. They fired Frank Wright in the middle of the season, and they just hired the Bucs OC Dave Canales, and I think this is going to be huge. This is basically going to be Bryce Young's like, hey, if you can't do it under this guy, we're going to find somebody else. But this guy was huge for Baker Mayfield, and he saw the offense for the Bucs. They need to give him some time. That's why they gave him the 6-year contract, because they're going to have some difficulties rebuilding because they traded away a lot of picks for. I mean, that is a definition of a dumpster fire team. But I feel like Canales was in a good spot there, and they might be able to build something out of there. And he did bring over his wideout coach from the Bucs as the offensive coordinator, but Canales was going to be calling the plays as the head coach, which makes sense because he did a really good job this year for the Bucs.
Yeah, he's done a fantastic job. Apparently, wherever he's gone, he's really elevated quarterback play.
Yeah.
So it could be really good for Bryce Young.
Yep. And this is and we're going to get into a couple big ones. So the Chargers fired Brandon Staley, brought in Jim Harbaugh. Everybody's been talking about this one. I think this is a big move. Obviously, Brandon Staley needed to go.
Yeah,
it was just time.
He should have been fired during the blowout versus the Raiders.
Yeah, he should have been fired last year. But them getting Jim Harbaugh is huge, and not only for the Chargers organization, but I think it's huge for Justin Herbert. You know, we've been wanting to see Justin Herbert kind of elevate his game. I've been knocking on him all year about how it's like, man, you've got all this stuff around you, and you've got the talent of the gods, and you just can't do anything with it. So maybe Jim Harbaugh being there is huge. I don't know if he's going to call plays, but what I do know is Kellen Moore is no longer there. He is now the OC for the Eagles, which is kind of funny if you're a Cowboys fan. But, so do you have any comments on Jim Harbaugh being the coach of the Chargers now?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a demonstrative help to Justin Herbert. I think they need to stick with Harbaugh for as long as they can with Herbert and just to see what he can do, because they talked about Jim Harbaugh with Alex Smith. You know, when they first started, I think they had a terrible record, and then the next year they went to an AFC championship when no one thought they would. So Jim Harbaugh can coach. He belongs in the NFL.
And if you think about it, it's going to create some really cool matchups. Sean Payton, Jim Harbaugh, and then in that division, Andy Reid versus Jim Harbaugh twice a year.
Yep.
And then you
John Harbaugh. His brother.
And then let's see.
Doug Peterson. Yeah.
Oh, I was trying to figure out where I am on my list. The next one we have, I think this one's very interesting. I think this one was the most surprising of the offseason was the Titans firing Vrabel.
Yeah,
now Vrabel is one of the two coaches, the other one being Belichick, which we'll get to, but Vrabel is one of the coaches that did not get a head coaching job. So the question is he going to sit out a year, or is he going to go be a coordinator somewhere else? I just think it's very interesting that the Titans got rid of him. I think they're just kind of looking for a new breath of fresh air, a new breath of fresh air. And I think that's why they hired the Bengals OC Brian Callahan. As their offensive coordinator. I think they want to see if Will Levis is legit. I think they think they have pieces on offense that they can make work. That being, I don't know if Derrick Henry's going to be there next year, but I mean, you're going to have Burks there. You're still going to have DeAndre Hopkins. You know, they have some pieces to work with where they could maybe make something happen there. So I think the Titans are just kind of looking for a new start, especially when they look around in their division and like, okay, you got AR-15 playing for the Colts. You've got Stroud, and you have T-Law. Like, we need to make a change here. We're going to be left behind. So I commend them for that, but I'm also at the same time like, I thought Vrabel was a pretty good coach. So
he's a very good coach, and he got the short end of the stick with a guy like Tannehill and Malik Willis, and then they drafted Will Levis, and they're like, well, this is no discredit to Vrabel, but there's no sense in him developing yet another quarterback when he's good enough to win with a guy like Tannehill. Let him go win with a better guy. And then we'll get an offensive-minded head coach to lead Will Levis. I think that was probably part of the logic. I'm not saying I agree with it because I think Vrabel's a great coach. So,
the last one I have is not the last one, but this one we'll go over quickly. Raiders fired Josh McDaniels midseason. And then Antonio Pierce. I've already kind of talked about it earlier in my rankings, but Antonio Pierce becoming the interim head coach. He had a lot of player backing. I think that one makes a lot of sense.
Players coach.
Players coach. And then the last one I have is Patriots letting go of the all-time great Bill Belichick and promoting from within Gerard Mayo, who played linebacker for the Patriots for a long, long time. I'm kind of interested to see how that plays out, though. I would have felt like the Patriots would have gone with somebody offensively, with how notoriously bad their offense has been since Brady left.
Yeah.
But maybe they find a good OC that's not from the Belichick tree, and they figure out a way to make it work. And the question is, I don't know where they're going to go at quarterback. Like, are they going to draft somebody? Are they going to? I mean, a lot of questions in the Patriots organization right now. So,
yeah, it's a complete flooded out rebuild, and
yep.
I think they'll go. This is a good quarterback draft to do it, especially if the participants end up entering the draft. You need to go out and get a guy like J.J. McCarthy. But we'll see. Hey, maybe go after another Michigan quarterback. It worked the last time, but complete rebuild over there. Belichick not getting a head coaching job through one cycle is kind of odd to me, but I just think I don't really think it's people not calling Bill Belichick. I think Jerry Jones commented on this is a make or break year for Mike McCarthy, and if he doesn't win this year, then he would want to talk to Bill Belichick. And I'm like, oh my God. But yeah, I mean that's basically it.
And then to wrap up our list, I have like a couple. I'll just shoot
fire away.
Yeah, coordinator jobs that have been filled that are kind of interesting to us, like the New England Patriots. We're talking about OCs. Bill O'Brien was the OC there; they fired him, and then Alex Van Pelt is the new OC. He spent 4 seasons as the Browns offensive coordinator and the quarterbacks coach. That's huge for them. Hopefully, that works out. Another interesting one is the one that everybody's been talking about all year, Pittsburgh Steelers firing Matt Canada, and they actually picked up Arthur Smith. I don't know if that's good for them or not, considering what he couldn't figure out how to get the ball to like huge people in this league. The other one that a lot of people have talked about is the Green Bay Packers. They fired defensive coordinator Joe Barry. If you look at Packers Twitter or a lot of their talks, they've been wanting to get rid of him for a while now. And they hired Jeff Hafley, who is the Boston College head coach.
Yeah, I saw that. That was strange.
Yeah. And then our division rival, the Eagles, we've been talking about their coordinators all year and how horrible they were. They fired Brian Johnson, their offensive coordinator, and hired Kellen Moore. And then they fired their defensive coordinator, Sean Desai, I think is how you say his name. And they hired Vic Fangio, which to me is kind of worrisome. I think Kellen Moore's good. I don't know if he's going to be good with Hurts, but Vic Fangio with that defense is going to be pretty scary, I think. So, and then the other one that played out this year, and the last one I'll kind of highlight is the Bills hiring full-time now Joe Brady for OC.
Yeah, that's going to be good.
I think that's huge for Josh Allen.
Yeah.
And it really showed, like Jared said earlier, in the later part of this year of how different the offense looked for the Bills and how effective it looked. So I think those are the most key coordinators right there. And there's still a lot of openings left. So we'll see some more movement as time goes on.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be I like the one that I like best is Joe Brady. I just think it clearly made a difference those last 5 or 6 games.
Yeah, it made the most sense for sure.
Yeah. Well, all right. Those are your coaching updates from across the NFL, which we're going to dive into more depth, obviously, during the offseason in season 2 of the TRAK podcast, which will be starting in around March. We'll announce a launch date, and we'll be a lot more active with content in season 2, and we're pretty excited for it. So anyway, we'll be back next Wednesday to kind of give our Super Bowl predictions and do a lot of fun stuff and reminisce on the times that the Cowboys were in the Super Bowl in the 90s, I guess, and just kind of
cry soft tears,
compact all of the script into one, and it's all been leading to this. So you'll catch us next week, shattering the script for the 49ers versus Chiefs Super Bowl. So keep in mind that episode and share this episode with your friends on social media. And thank you guys for listening. Remember to subscribe to the podcast. You can visit trak.pod on Instagram to view our link tree, or the TRAKpod on Twitter to view our link tree as well. You can get access to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, where you can find our video. Okay, I'm kidding. But thank you guys very much. This is TRAK 33, the script, and we will catch y'all next week.